How did I get into filmmaking? I don't know, Star Wars. I've always been interested in film. I've always loved going to the movies, you know, with my dad when I was a kid, and watching videos at home and all that. And I don't know, it's just something I've always been into, and I like the idea of storytelling and stuff like that. And when it was time to go to college, I wanted to go to film school. And my high school, I wanted to go to NYU, and no one had ever applied to NYU from my high school before. So, and the guidance counselor had no idea how to even do that. They were just like, we don't know. And they wanted, they wanted a portfolio and all these things. So I sort of thought that if I had to be making films already, which is sort of silly, like if you're in high school and you haven't really done anything, it's, and I realized now that they wanted a portfolio of just whatever, your sort of creativeness. It could have been drawings, it could have been writing, it could have been anything. They just wanted to see, I believe, like creativity. So I never went to NYU, and I remember I had a Film Threat magazine that had a listing of all the film schools, and I basically had to go in-state for money reasons. Yeah. And I saw in Film Threat magazine the VCU had a film department, and the cool thing about VCU's film department was that they had an internship with NASA. And I was like, holy shit, like I love films, I love outer space, like I'm gonna go to VCU and make movies for NASA. And so sure enough, I ended up going to VCU, and they didn't quite have the film program they have now. It was sort of a hodgepodge of film classes and photography and video stuff. And I asked everyone, where's this internship for NASA? Like, how do I do that? And no one knew what I was talking about. And I have no idea why it was in Film Threat magazine that they had that, but apparently it didn't exist anymore. So I just started making films at VCU. And I went there, and then I got out and moved to New York, and started working there first in production as a PA, and sort of worked my way up in editing and doing post. And I had written a screenplay called Teenagers from Mars that I was trying to make into an independent film, and I just didn't really have any luck convincing people that this would make an interesting movie. It was all about comic books, and at the time, comic book movies weren't what they are now. That's completely changed. But so we get a lot of like, why isn't it about like music and dancing and like Footloose or something? And I'm like, well, because those are other movies. This is about comic books, and that's what makes it special. And my wife was like, well, maybe you should do it as a comic book, because I'm also a huge comic book fan. And so we did that, and then Teenagers from Mars became a comic book series that was successful. And so I've been doing comics now for a while, for about a decade, and that's been my career. But now I'm getting back into the filmmaking because I always love making movies, and really hadn't realized that it had been so long since I'd made my last one. And that's when I made Black Eyes. That's sort of my coming back to film. My style of filmmaking's evolved a lot over time. I mean, at first, it was just trying to make things make sense, like put images together that amounted to something more than just the images apart. But as I've been going, and sort of my latest thing is I found this book called Immoral Tales. It's about these Euro horror and sex films from like the 60s and 70s. So like Jean Roland, Jess Franco, I always mess up his name, Valerian Borovchik. It's a tough one. And these sort of filmmakers that made, they're seen as like Euro sleaze or horror films or whatever, but what happened was they got money to make the movies because there was enough horror in it to sell, to sell to an audience, or enough nudity or sex or whatever to sell to an audience. But at the same time, they were able to do really personal, interesting stuff sort of in between the exploitation that was required for the financing, and so I've really got into that lately of these sort of, I find, very interesting artists that are really on the edge of what would be considered permissible or artistic. I mean, like Valerian is a really great one. He's an amazing artist. When you see his films, they're obviously art films, but they're also incredibly, sort of softcore pornography. And somebody said that he specifically is too pornographic to be considered a great artist, but way too good of an artist to be considered a pornographer. And I just find all that kind of stuff fascinating. It's the kind of film that you only get to after digging for a while. Like, I mean, obviously you see all the mainstream stuff, and then there's sort of the independent level beyond beyond that, and then you get to this sort of deeper level of the stuff most people consider, not very good. And that's the stuff I like. And specifically the French genre of fantastique films. Which Black Eyes I consider a fantastique film, and one of the sort of main sort of hook for that genre is not knowing, the audience is, they're unclear if the film is a realistic film or a supernatural film. So like Jean Roland did a lot of these vampire films, and you just really could never tell if these people were actually vampires or they were just very strange people running around. And so like Black Eyes sort of plays with that. Like the audience is sort of more in on the gag that they're faking some of these things, but there is that sort of thread of imagination.